Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Insider. Before we start, I thought I'd take some time out to talk to my good friend and person that pays me, Joshua J, about his new show, How Magicians Think. Joshua, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Damien.
No, thank you for doing it, because I know we've been running Showtime for a while, but I'm still yet to see a virtual show. Can you explain to me and our listeners, who may be in the same boat as me, what to expect from your virtual show? What is it?
Yeah, my virtual show is kind of a hybrid between a show and a talk.
Okay.
So it's everything I love about magic. And I realized that the virtual show format is the perfect place for me to bring viewers here, into my apartment, into my world. So it's a show that celebrates the creativity of magic, the history of magic, the psychology of magicians, and all of these things that would be weird to talk about on a stage randomly in your town, but that make perfect sense when you're here seeing these objects in my collection and seeing the way I come up with these tricks. It's kind of like, to be crass, it's like behind the music for magic.
And what's the level of interactivity? Is it people sitting back and enjoying you do magic, or is there a chance for people to get involved?
It's an interesting question. I think that's the first question magicians ask when they're putting together their virtual shows. And I think a lot of magicians weigh on the side of everybody's helping in every trick, but then you get what you were joking about a second ago, which is the procedural kind of magic over and over and over again. I would say to you that I have less interactivity than most of the virtual shows I've seen, but my show has more interaction because between every trick, I take questions.
Right.
I take questions like, do you ever mess up a trick on stage? Was Houdini as good as he says? Who are the greatest living magicians? I take questions to help deepen people's appreciation for magic.
What's been the hardest thing about putting together the show?
I think for me, the hardest adjustment by far is the change in the way we interact. So like in the program that I use, I truly can't even see the audience's faces for the most part.
Right.
And that's weird because everything I do, I hope I take into consideration what the audience is feeling, thinking, emoting, and you really feel like you're performing in a room by yourself a lot of the time. That's why these questions have been such a great find for me in terms of format, because I actually do get a chance to talk to people and answer their questions. And yes, some of the tricks have people choosing things and naming things and interacting, but it's interesting because I didn't lean into that as much as other magicians did.
So the questions really have been your saving grace in how to make the show feel more like a real magic show.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I made the decision that I wanted this to be a really personal show, and it's that epiphany that you always have, where you're going, how can I answer the questions they're thinking about? How can I reach what's making them curious? And it's like, why don't you just ask them what they're curious about and talk to them? Duh, and then there it is.
And we're out of time, Josh, but when is the show?
Show is March 3rd. 9 p.m. Eastern time. But listen, if you're in a different time zone, you can tune in for 7 days after the show and then watch it streaming through your Vanishing Inc. account. This is a great opportunity if you have a partner or a spouse or adult children or people in your life that you want to watch something with. I think this will deepen people's appreciation for magic. And I really hope, if you've supported my work in the past, I really hope you'll come because it's special to me and I think it's going to be a good night.
Joshua J, thank you very much indeed. Now, on with the rest of the Insider. Aside from yours, of course, what mentalism books do you think that anyone...
I almost should show you mine. So I have I'm huge, and both sides of the room too. You can't see the other side of the room, but it looks just the same. I mean, the classics are always... Everybody talks about the classics as being, 13 Steps to Mentalism and those kind of books. That's a really good. I like that book. I mean, a lot of the material in that book has been superseded by stuff that's far better. But as a one-stop shop for learning about all the various and especially for learning about all the various facets of mentalism, I still think it's a great book. It's a good book to give to beginners and say, this is what mentalism is all about. But eventually you're going to reach a point where you want to learn the real stuff, or the modern stuff or whatever. And, the Jinx is still the collected Jinx, which you can buy very inexpensively on CD-ROM or something. It's just a mecca of plot ideas. It's just full of great stuff. Again, the methods are a little dated, but Bascom Jones' Magic, Magick, which is unfortunately expensive to buy because it's such a huge resource, and so in order to have it all, you need to buy some expensive books. So any of Bob Cassidy's major works, The Art of Mentalism 2 being the place I would start. Bob had a lot of personal difficulties in his life, and so tended at times in his life to crank out a lot of stuff in order to earn money. And none of his stuff is bad, but the really good stuff are things like that one. Bruce Bernstein has a collection not unlike my own, a sort of looking back on a career and picking all the really good stuff and putting it into one high quality book called Unreal, which is amazing. I've probably missed some really great stuff, but again, it depends. It depends on your interest. Sure. If you're interested in readings and doing readings, then anything by Richard Webster is really good. So again, if you're interested in a specific element of mentalism, then I could go on with.
There's more niche stuff.
But general stuff. Those are the ones that flew off the top of my head, and I'm going to get a phone call from one of my best friends.
Why did you?
My book? Yeah, and they're probably right too.
Let's talk about your book. There's a whole chapter on magic squares. Now, I think I might kind of know some of the answers to this from the beginning of our conversation, but what interests you particularly about magic squares?
Well, first of all, I think magic squares are a great item for a mentalist in particular. For a variety of ways. And I list a whole bunch of them in the book, but I'm just going to give you 3 of them.
Okay.
First of all, it's a very good way to start a mentalism performance.
Okay.
Because it has no supernatural connotations. There's no suggestion that you're doing something that's occult or whatever, paranormal. It's very clever. They're not sure how you do it. Boy, you must be a really smart guy or something, which is good. I want them to think I have a bigger brain than everybody else. So it's good for that. And there's this notion that not everybody ascribes to, but that I like in mentalism, is that a mentalism performance. Now I'm thinking now of a parlor show or a stage show, not just a few casual things you might do for friends. A mentalism performance should escalate in various ways, but it should escalate in its level of believability. So, don't start right off the bat by, doing mental transmission of a body from one side of the room to the other. That's just, insane, right? So start them off with something that everybody can get, like a magic square. It's, and now let's try something a little more. Have to push the envelope a little bit. And then, so that by the time you get to the point where you want you want to levitate something, which I would hope a mentalist would never actually try to do. But hey, it's a type of mentalism. It's psychokinetic ability.
Sure.
So you should do it. But then it's more credible by that point, because now you've proved yourself by getting there rather than just coming out of the gate doing it. So that's one reason. Magic squares can be a very clever reveal technique. So if you've divined a number through your whatever method, you have to reveal it. And one way to do that is to show that it's been in an envelope all along. Another way to reveal it is using a magic square. So again, a very simple I wouldn't necessarily do it this way myself, but a simple explanation is you write down a whole bunch of numbers on a board, and it gets to be a bit of a running gag. Is this your number? No. Is this your number? No. You know, you just like, and then at the end you say, well, what is your number? And oh, it was 37 or whatever. And so now you show them all the different ways that it yeah. So you get an extra climax, multiple climaxes actually. I told you I was only going to tell you 3 ways, but I'm going to tell you 4. Another good thing about mentalism is that it lets you do something that mentalists don't often have an opportunity, or magicians in general, don't often have an opportunity to do. And that is a really good staging technique is this notion of callbacks. Mm-hmm. And comedians use it all the time. Any good comedian, you're going to see that many, many times to great effect. And it's difficult to do that in mentalism, but it's not so difficult to do it with a magic square presentation, because there's no law that says you have to reveal all of the myriad ways that a magic square adds up all at the same time. In fact, it's a little boring. It's a little boring. Once they've seen it, there's kind of okay. Oh, and look, every corner on the diagonal. You know, but you can pull it out later. You can do like show all the rows and columns and the main diagonals, and and maybe the 4 corners of the big square, and it's great already what you did. So now go and do something else, and then remember that. I just thought, and then show them that all the 2x2 squares add up, and then go away again, and then go back and say, the 3x3 squares add up again. So it's a beautiful structure for callbacks, and it can be very funny, and it's really strong. Okay, what was the other one I was going to tell you? I was going to tell you 4, and now I've forgotten the 4th one.
Well, that one was worth 2, I think, Doug.
Yeah, that one was probably worth. Oh, no, I do remember the other one. And this is one that I found myself. This isn't necessarily intuitively. Well, I guess it is. Once I explain it, you'll see how great it is. Doing magic squares for people can be very personal. It doesn't have to just be a secret number that they thought of or whatever. It can be anything that's numeric. Sure. You can make into a magic square if you know how to do it. And so you can take somebody's birthday or a wedding anniversary or anything at all. The number of cars the automotive guy sold last year and broke the record for his automotive agency. Anything that's a number, you can turn it into a magic square. And so if you're able to do that on the fly with anything, which if you buy my book, you'll learn how to do it on the fly, then that can be one of the most personal things you can do for someone and leave with them afterwards. So one of my business card, I guess unfortunately I don't have any handy, but there's a picture of an old version of my business card in the book. And I've changed it since I wrote the book a couple of years ago now. But on my website, deceptionary.com, which you said you're going to point to somebody at some point. On that, there is an addendum section for this new book. And so anybody who has a new book can go to that website and find out all the stuff I've thought of or other people have thought of relative to what's in the book. It's all there. And it'll show you a picture of my new business card. But on the back of it, there's a pattern for doing magic square. And the most commercial thing I do, and for years, which is one of the reasons that I saved this particular thing until I retired and don't do so much anymore, was do these personalized magic squares for people on the back of my business card. So I ask for their birth date. I write their birth date in 4 of the squares, and then I fill in the rest of the squares to make it a magic square. So now they have a magic square that's not just some random thing they can show their friends. And it's their birth date.
That's a business card they're never going to throw away.
They're never going to throw away that business card. And if you're so inclined, not everybody's inclined this way, but if you're so inclined, you can do readings. You can do numerological type readings based on that. And I, in the book, give you a simplified way of doing that without having to read a big volume of numerology. So, to me, that's the most commercial thing in the book, is that one thing. And it's a magic square. So, what can I say?
You mentioned about the addendums having stuff from other people. The book's got
Yes.
several contributions in it from other performers.
Yes. I forget
Is
how many,
working,
6 or 7. Yeah.
yeah, is working collaboratively important to you, and what do you think the benefits are?
Those aren't. Those aren't really collaborative things, at least not particularly. I guess I'm trying to think now of what those items were, but no, one of them is a little bit collaborative, but most of them are not collaborative at all. They are the products of someone else.
Right.
And the reason I put them in the book is because they are things that I have used, and in almost all cases, I could think of one exception off the top of my, two exceptions off the top of my head. Other people would never know about those things because the people who created them don't write books. They're not really necessarily, magicians who perform for other magicians. So, and I thought, oh man, this is just so good. It shouldn't die with the creator. So I got their permissions. Sometimes it took a little arm twisting. Sometimes they just said, yeah, sure, whatever. But they're all great. I can say that because I have almost no input into them except for one of them. And they're great. Among the best things in the book are those at the back that have almost nothing to do with me.
Well,
Collaborative stuff. I guess I don't have a strong feeling about it.
Okay.
I work personally. I don't work well collaboratively because I'm so cerebral. I want to burrow into my little corner and think about this and maybe build a computer model of it or describe it mathematically or something. Now, that said, some of my best things are collaborative in the sense that I've talked to other people initially about the ideas. So, in fact, if you look at all of my work, if I had to characterize it, I think this is probably true. I tend to be an improver rather than a creator. Right. I'm not particularly good at sitting down and saying, now, what has nobody ever done before? And I'm going to be the first person to do this. I've never even really tried to do it because I've never particularly felt the need for that, for me personally. Sure. But what I'm really good at is taking something that exists and saying, is there a better, more deceptive, more entertaining way of doing this? And that I can do well. And part of it is because I'm just, persistent. I just keep at it forever. It takes a long time.
Absolutely.
There's a quote from the book. I can't give it to you verbatim off the top of my head, but there's a quote by Teller in the book that basically says, a lot of what can be characterized as what magicians do is just spending way more time on something than anybody else in the world would ever consider reasonable.
Yes.
And man, that just describes me perfectly.
But I've got a question following on from that then. That you've talked about being a perpetual student of magic and mentalism. So what do you mean by that?
That's just I think a good. That particular comment is related mostly to people who do readings. Because I just think I have fairly strong opinions about readings. Readings are a very controversial topic.
Yes.
And I have pretty strong opinions about it, and it's another thing we can talk about for a long time. But in terms of the presentation of readings, I have always believed that it is just a huge mistake for a reader to portray themselves as the final word, or the world's best tarot card reader, or a superbly trained expert who studied in the Orient for years. I just think that's all really, really bad. Partially because it interferes with the way readings actually work. Okay. And partially because I just think it's arrogant. I think you will be much better off if you just. It's just I'm a student of the thing. But you know more about it than they do anyway. Probably not always. If you're picking something like tarot or numerology, you might well be doing a reading for someone who knows a heck of a lot more about tarot than you do. So you have to be careful. But even if that were not the case, even if you always did know more, you should always act as though you're a student, you're learning. And that helps with the reading itself, because if you set yourself up as someone who issues proclamations about whatever the cards show or whatever, then you set yourself up to fail. Whereas if you're just a student, then we're all in this together. And that's really how readings work, is it's sort of a cooperative analysis of what the cards are showing. Of course, you don't want them to think that, but that's really what's going on. And you being a student makes it a lot easier for them to participate in this cooperation than if you set yourself up as the expert, and they're sitting back going, "Oh, now I'm going to get the real story from a real expert." So, and they'll go away remembering how accurate you were. All right, but it's just easier if you don't sort of state up front. I'm 97% accurate. No, that's really bad, really bad. Sets up a challenge that shouldn't be there.
Of course. I was interested in the book about the quick stack, which is a tetradistic stack. Now, apart from Ackerman and Canasta, I'm not too aware of many people using such a stack. Can you explain what it is and what its benefits are?
Okay, I could do the former better than I can do the latter.
Okay,
and the reason, let me tell you that first, and then I'll tell you the former. I'm not a card magician. I mean, when I was 17 years old, I was a bit of a card magician, but I stopped doing card magic when I went to college, and I never really did it again after that. So I don't know I know very little about card magic in that whole world. A tetradistic stack is one in which the numeric values of the cards repeat in 4 blocks. So if there are 52 cards in a stack, so there are 4 sequential blocks, 13 cards in each block. And in a tetradistic stack, the numerical order of the cards in each block is the same.
Okay.
Okay. So if you did a Pharaoh shuffle, perfect Pharaoh shuffle of a tetradistic stack, you would end up with pairs of cards, the same. And if you did 2 Pharaoh shuffles, you'd end up with 4 of a kinds, the same. Now, to me, my only interest in a memorized deck is that it be a memorized deck, that I know the position of every card that might be named, or I know the card at any position named, because that is an incredibly powerful thing.
For sure.
And I really don't care too much about the other elements, but there are 2 schools of thought. Again, I know a lot of card magicians, and so there are 2 schools of thought on what else you should care about other than the fact that you've memorized the stack. One school of thought is that the stack, whatever it is, has built into it all kinds of clever
poker
tricks.
hands or whatever.
They're wired poker hands, spelling tricks, stuff like that. And in fact, the 2 most popular stacks in the world, the Aronson stack and the Tamarisk stack, they're that type of a stack. They just have all that kind of stuff built into them. And I've never found that very compelling, because it's just like what we were talking about right when we first started talking. It's a personal opinion as to whether that is a good trick. Is that a good trick? Oh yeah, that's really cool. Spelling tricks suck, man. So the idea that someone else has picked a number of tricks and wired them into a stack, but they're their tricks, the tricks that they've picked, has almost no appeal to me at all. I mean, I'll look at them and maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but anytime I do look at them, I think, yeah, I was right. Those kind of suck. If I'm only going to do 3 tricks for people, it's not going to be one of those. They're not that. They're okay. They won't know how I did it. It'll be, but are they earth-shaking, which is what they should be in your performance?
Yeah.
So I don't like that idea. The other idea that some card people ascribe to is that no, that's not how you do it. You build a trick that has some kind of, you build a stack that has some kind of structure to it that can be used to do other things really easily.
Sure.
And a tetradistic stack lets you do that sort of thing. So there are, talk to the card experts and you'll get better answers than that. But it's one of the reasons that things like 8 Kings and size 7s are popular. It's because most people don't even really think about it. But those are tetradistic stacks. Now, they're not very good stack. They're intended to be sequential stacks. Both of those, size 7s and 8 Kings and many others, are intended to be sequential stacks. The idea being that if you know one card, you know the card after it and the card before it.
Yep.
But you don't know that it's the 14th card in the deck. You just know, okay? So that's a sequential stack. And sequential stacks can be cut any number of times because they're circular in design. And the two most popular sequential stacks are size 7s and 8 Kings. But as I say, there are literally dozens of others. And a lot of really qualified, especially older, a little less true nowadays, but in the sort of 30s, 40s, 50s back then, a lot of really important magicians whose names we all know made their careers using things like size 7s.
Right.
And size 7s as a sequential stack is not a very good sequential stack. You look at a size 7 spread in front of you, and it'll take you about 4 seconds to realize that, these cards are all in order. Red, black alternating, the suits are in order, the numerical values are 3 or 4 apart, depending on what you do. So it's not a very good stack. So why did the people of old like it so much, and especially Stuart James, who was like a god in magical history, and that was his favorite. And you think, well, why? I mean, it's not a very good stack, and the answer is because it's a tetradistic stack. So all the stuff I talk about, you can do with either of those. So.
Right, fair.
So Quick Stack was my first published effect. That was, if it hadn't been for Quick Stack, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today.
Wow.
A good friend of mine who has passed away a couple of years ago, Roger Farabee, you probably know his name in the UK.
Yeah.
I lived in Cambridge for a while, for a little over a year. And we became very close, and he, of course, if you know Roger, you know that he knows every magician in the entire UK, and he introduced me to 80% of them. And it was just an amazing year, and we became good friends. And I had invented Quick Stack, and I explained it to him, and he's like, "This is brilliant. You should publish this." And I, nobody cares. No, he says, "This is really, really good. You should publish this." And so I thought about it, and then I added a few other things of mine and published my first book. But that was the lead item in my first book. And
wow.
And so that's where it came from. Because I would try to do. I don't care personally about the tetradistic nature because I never make use of that. In fact, to me, that's a bit of a flaw because it does mean that that you can't exhaustively look at the cards. You can look at them, and you're not going to see it right away. But if you sit down and spend some time, you're going to suddenly realize, oh, wait a minute, these are the same here that they are over here. And to me, that's a drawback. But I used that stack for many years because I was always trying to find a real like a perfect, okay?
Sure,
a perfect analytical memorized deck that didn't have any repetition at all. You could give it to somebody and they could spend the rest of their lives and they'd never see any order. And I eventually worked out one, and it's in the book. So if you want like a perfect one, but many card people will say, yeah, that's really cool, man. I've never seen anything like that. But I'm going to use the tetradistic one because it lets me do a lot of things. So,
well, thank you, Roger, for starting this journey and enabling us to talk and have this fabulous book. Doug, we've run out of time. We always end the show with 4 quick fire questions. Are you ready?
I guess.
Favorite pizza topping?
Nothing at all. I like plain margarita pizza.
Absolutely. Favorite movie?
Groundhog Day.
Favorite person or people who make music?
Oh, I'm a big music fan, and my list is very, very, very long.
I
would say of living people. Let me restrict it to living people, and I'm going to say Chris Christopherson.
And finally, who would you rather fight? 1 giant Andy Gladwin or 100 tiny Joshua Jays?
Oh, I'd go for the 100 tiny Joshua Gates if I had to fight them. So.
Doug, thank you
Divide
so
and conquer.
much. Thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honour to have you on the show. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for your interest.